In one of Scott Morrison's visits to Melbourne this year, he washed a woman's hair in Mount Eliza. It was vintage ScoMo, performing a simple task in front of the press to try to show off his everyday Australian credentials. But if the published polls are to be believed, it's the Prime Minister's coalition that is about to get a haircut in Victoria. Of course, using a statewide poll is not that simple, and indicative of general sentiment rather than how seats will fall. Insiders and strategists from across politics say there's only a handful of Victorian seats in play. For years, the coalition's statewide vote has floundered in Victoria. The Liberals hold just 12 of 38 seats, the Nationals 3 more, and Labor has 21. Former John Howard gave the state the moniker, the Massachusetts of Australia, because of its progressive bent over the past 40 years. Pundits and strategists once again point to Queensland and NSW as the major battlegrounds at the upcoming election. But it doesn't mean Victoria is inconsequential, and there's some good news for Anthony Albanese. A sign at a Melbourne polling station on election day in Victoria. Labor is more than likely to pick up the new 39th Victorian seat of Hawke on Melbourne's outer northwest edge. On paper, the seat is safe. ABC psephologist Anthony Green marks Hawke as a notionally Labor seat with a 10.2% margin. But party insiders, strategists and pollsters note that 2 years of the pandemic and a growing sense of government neglect in the outer burbs mean Hawke is not the laid-down mizzy as some may hope. Chisholm in Melbourne's middle-rung eastern suburbs is the hottest battleground in the state. It includes parts of Box Hill and Glen Waverley. It's held by the Liberals' Gladys Liu by just 0.5%. This is a must-win seat for Labor if Anthony Albanese is to win office. Election to be COVID test for government. Victorians have endured more COVID pain than the rest of the country, and the impact on Melburnians' lives in particular is yet to be tested at the ballot box. Both sides of politics acknowledge that there is anger at government, federal and state, and that has resulted in third parties and independents increasing their share of the vote. This growing cohort already existed, but has been amplified by the coronavirus. For Labor, the problem presents in outer low-income suburbs. Some residents in these suburbs feel neglected by government because the ALP takes them for granted and the coalition pays them no attention. This election will be a real test of how big this cohort is. And while the status quo is likely to remain, it may be a sign of challenges to come. Seats to watch in this category include the Labor seats of Hawke and McEwen and Liberal-held Latrobe. The budget includes plenty of money for infrastructure projects in the northwest, which shows the Liberals believe there may be ground to be made. Closer to the city, the Liberal Party is facing a different challenge from its moderate flank. The spread of teal, or climate-focused independence, is not new, but in 2022 the campaigns are better organised and much better funded. Liberals concede that they have to defend tooth and nail in seats that were once considered safe, including Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's Kooyong and Assistant Minister Tim Wilson's Goldstein, where well-credentialed women Monique Ryan and Zoe Daniel, a former ABC correspondent, are mounting an attack. It means precious campaign funds are diverted from target seats and senior ministers cannot travel as much, as they need to stay and fight in their own patches. For the last 2 elections, all eyes have been on Higgins, but it has fallen off the radar despite being still a close contest. Even her opponents concede MP Katie Allen has built a strong presence and is favourite to win. Canberra comparisons could affect candidates. The election will also test the parochialism of Victorians. The state government has been effective in arguing Victoria fares poorly compared to NSW and Queensland when it comes to federal cash and assistance. This was once again displayed in the budget, where Victoria's share of infrastructure was dwarfed by NSW, Queensland and Western Australia. The Treasurer says Victoria's 10-year share of infrastructure cash is 26%. Canberra's perceived differing attitude to Sydney's COVID chaos and Melbourne's coronavirus crisis has not been forgotten by some. Frydenberg's attacks on the state government during the darkest days of the pandemic were a divisive tactic, which won him kudos in some circles and disdain in others. A valuable lesson was learnt at the 2019 elections. Polls can be wrong, and state or nationwide polling is not a great indicator of how many seats will be won and lost. In Victoria, this polling suggested Labor would win a swag of seats and help make the local boy, Bill Shorten, PM. But only 2 seats changed hands, when Labor picked up Dunkley and Corangamite. Labor is odds-on to retain them, but their thin margins mean both sides are keeping a close eye on the campaigns on the ground. If Labor loses either, it makes Anthony Albanese's journey to the Lodge more difficult. Labor knows it needs to bank wins in Victoria. The Greens are unlikely to occupy more seats in Parliament after this election. With a coalition government in power, it is unlikely the Greens will pick up seats beyond Melbourne, which is held by the leader Adam Bant. Outside the city, an interesting battle looms in Nichols in northern Victoria. Footballer-turned-politician Damien Drum is hanging up the boots after stints in state and federal parliament. The Nationals are hopeful of retaining the seat, but the Liberals are trying to win it back, all while well-backed independent Rob Priestley will give both sides a run of their money. The corresponding state seat of Shepparton was won by independent Susanna Sheed at the 2014 election, and she's held it since. Predicting elections is a mug's game, especially after the upheaval of the pandemic, but right now Victoria does not look like happy hunting grounds for the PM, and the number of times he makes it to Melbourne will show you just how bad, or well, it's going.